Hello, hello. I'm Eleanor Rose, and today we are talking with the amazing Leah Velocity. Leah, I am so excited that I was able to fit you into this summit. I know you have a super busy schedule right now, and I'm so thankful that you made the time to be here with us.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to make a little bit of time. Hopefully, this lawnmower doesn't interrupt us, but I'll find another spot if I need to.
Okay. Well, I can't hear the lawnmower, so hopefully nobody else can. I think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so again, just thank you for being here. And what I like to is start out with is how did you end up getting into the freelance nude modeling world?
so I was actually a student. I was a freshman at a college in Rochester, New York, called the Rochester Institute of Technology.
Hmm.
Um, and I had been doing circus arts and performance and like go-go dancing and stilt walking and like fire dancing and all this sort of like really aesthetically involved performance art stuff as a teenager in Colorado, which is where I grew up. And when I moved to upstate New York, there wasn't really people doing that stuff. Like what parties and electronic music events there were didn't have performers. So the venues were kind of there, but the interest wasn't. Um, so I found myself at this impasse where I was going to school for engineering, so I had like no creative outlet really, because like the first 2 years of engineering is just like really strictly science, math, and I didn't really have access to dance or circus arts or any of that sort of stuff where I was. So kind of coincidentally, some friends who were in the photography department at Rochester Institute of Technology, which is kind of like a nationally renowned photography program. They asked me if I would model for them because they had all these crazy costumes, and I did my makeup weird just for the hell of it frequently, and had interesting hair and just kind of like looked different than a lot of people. Um, and that was really what kind of started it for me. It's actually really funny because I also at that age applied to both Suicide Girls and God's Girls, and they both rejected me. Um,
Really?
Interesting to note because in the past 2 years, both of those institutions have contacted me personally asking me to model for them. So I kind of like grew up thinking that that was the only way I could do modeling was to
Mhm.
do this kind of like alt smut stuff, which I really kind of idealized as a teenager for a lot of strange reasons. But yeah, so I started doing more creative stuff and moved from doing, you know, just as a creative outlet in college. The recession hit when I was 2/3 of the way done with my freshman year.
Mhm.
And my parents told me they weren't going to help me with college anymore. And I made my first trip to New York City pretty much immediately after that,
Mhm.
and got my first paid modeling job and just ran with it basically. I had no idea what I was doing for the first 6 months that I was doing it, but I was able to pay my rent and keep food on the table somehow. So I figured I would just keep trying to make that happen. And talking to other models is really what took me from the level of being like, I don't know what to charge. I don't know if I should even be paid for this, to understanding that like there's a lot of labor that goes into this sort of work. Um, and while it's a wonderful creative outlet, like it is also something that like takes skill and dedication and time. So yeah, it's been my main career on and off for the past eight 8 years now. And it's been a really interesting ride. It's taken me all over the world. So
That is awesome. Actually, you already went ahead and answered my next question too, which was going to be how community with other models has helped you throughout that process. So you said that that's how you really started figuring out what it takes to run a freelance modeling career?
Yeah, it was a combination of talking to some photographers who were like actually interested in, you know, looking out for people as opposed to taking advantage of them. And then also finding camaraderie with a few other models, and actually figuring out like what is standard rate, like because when I started, I had no idea. Like the idea of earning more than $25 an hour for doing anything to an 18-year-old who's only worked hourly jobs is like preposterous, right? Like
Right.
it doesn't really compute. So it I don't know. It took me actually like putting myself out there enough to network with other models to even understand that I wasn't really I'm still kind of bad at the like online networking with other models, just because I feel like I spend too much time of my life on the internet to begin with. But it was befriending a few models, like Kesem and a couple of like, they're not really current models anymore, but they were big on the East Coast in their time, and getting to talk to them, that was what helped me figure out how to professionally ask for rates that allowed me to treat this more as a career and less as a means like scraping by.
Right. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I really like how you put that too. More of a career and less as a means of scraping by, because I feel like that's sort of where a lot of models get stuck as they're trying to
Yeah.
really do well as a freelance model.
Yeah, and it really takes approaching it more as a business and less as a extension of like your own personal ego is, I guess, the closest word that I would have for it. But because your brand is yourself with modeling, it can get really convoluted and weird, and people make some like slightly not so business like decisions and say some not so business like things, and kind of like permit really unprofessional behavior without realizing that it might harm them in either a material, financial, or career oriented sort of way. And I definitely experienced a lot of that in my first year of modeling because I was 18. Like I
Mm-hmm.
had pretty much no idea what I was doing. But I feel really grateful that I was able to like interact with a pretty high caliber of like professionals throughout that year just by being really ballsy, honestly, about reaching out to people and just being like, "Hi, I have weird hair. Do you want to take pictures of me?" Like not really expecting like great response, but being really optimistic in the way that I approach people, and just really respectful and genuine. And I got a really good response from that, and I got to work with people who, at least within the Model Mayhem community, people like T.H. Taylor, who some people like idolize, and I I didn't have a very good portfolio at that point, and it didn't really make sense to me. But the feedback I've gotten from making those connections was that instead of attempting to network from the get-go with people, I attempted to acknowledge them as, the artists that they're trying to be or the people that they're trying to be first, which I think is something that gets lost a lot in the social media world.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. I like that a lot. Yeah, so it sounds like you managed to, wow, it's getting loud over there.
Yeah, I told you the lawnmower. I think it's gonna go back around the corner in a second. I can also
Okay,
give
no
you
worries.
headphones if I need to. I'm sorry.
It's cool. We'll make it work. But yeah, it sounds like within a relatively short period of time, you went from having no clue what you're doing to, even if you were still sort of lost, at least really managing to pull together a good portfolio and a good income.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Of course. So I said it sounds like within a really short period of time, you were able to go from having no clue what you were doing and being totally new to, even if you were still sort of lost, having a really good portfolio and bringing in a good income with the modeling.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah.
I love that behind your ear tattoo. I got a really good view of it there, and it's gorgeous. And actually, that's something that I really want to make sure we talk about. Is one of the things that's always impressed me, because you were around in one of my idols when I first started, is photographers love to throw around these ideas that any model with tattoos or colored hair or piercings is absolutely incapable of creating artistic or classical work. And you've always sort of been the model that I've pointed to prove them wrong. Like, nope, nope, it's possible.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that, and I think that what photographers mean when they say that is that it is easier to create things that look classical or fine art with models that are more anonymous. I think it's a matter of anonymity, and that is what kind of motivates that style of thinking. And while I can appreciate that on the one hand, and like I am well versed in a number of poses that hide almost all of my tattoos somehow, I I also really appreciate. Honestly, I don't appreciate all tattoos, but I appreciate it when tattoos add texture and complementary texture to whatever surroundings or lighting or balance or composition that an image has. And I think that a lot of that is left up to, oh, they're going to come right next to me now. Can we pause?
Okay, so we paused the recording briefly to let the lawnmower go by. So go on.
Oh no, he's coming.
It feels like it feels like an outdoor shoot.
Okay, I'm gonna move inside. 1 second.
I'll pause you. Okay, so we had a location change, and to me that sort of felt like an outdoor shoot where it's like, okay, I think they're gone. We're probably nope, people are coming. No, I think we're good. Let's take nope, people are coming. Okay, let's just go to the studio.
Yeah, you're just like, well, we tried.
We tried.
It was so nice out until
it was
right when we started our interview.
It's all good. Okay, I think we were talking about your tattoos and making it work.
Oh yeah, with like fine art stuff.
Right.
So I kind of feel that the claim that like tattoos make fine art difficult or impossible as far as like nude photography goes, to me that always seems a little bit like a cop out, or a little bit on the lazy side coming from photographers, just because I think it can work even with not so complimentary or interesting tattoos. I believe that there are ways to create artful and like really interesting and kind of classical images. And I also just I feel like there's a lot of kind of elitism and lots of isms inherent in these kind of like idealized body types that are acceptable for classical like fine art. And unfortunately, like I've seen that also in the hiring, not just with tattoos, but like along like racial lines, along body types, for fine art academies, just like in talking to other art models and like applying and like seeing who gets accepted and things like that. There's a lot of rhetoric about like this kind of not too voluptuous, like average, like completely like untattooed, unmodified, pale, like natural looking white woman basically is what a lot of like fine artists like think is acceptable and appropriate. And
Rubenesque, but not too Rubenesque.
yeah, you
Like,
know,
like they want the
not
Rubenesque
all
ideal,
women,
but
like
smaller.
not supermodel skinny though. Like
Yeah.
there's like a very narrow range of like what is supposed to be right for that genre.
Real.
And I find that a lot of fine art work that I appreciate, or the work that I appreciate that I am modeling for, um, winds up being a lot more empowering to the individual model, or like femininity, or just like humanity as a whole. Like the pieces inherently become more human because there is some sort of identifying mark. And I really like that personally, and I know some people might not. So it's kind of a matter of taste, but I have strong opinions the other way.
That's really awesome. That's actually brought up a few things that I hadn't even considered within modeling with tattoos. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Yeah. So what was it like? I'm assuming, did you already have tattoos when you started?
So when I started when I was 18, I had already gotten like the script part of what's on my
Mm-hmm.
chest. Like I didn't have all of this
Right.
crazy core stuff, but I had the script from pretty much from the beginning. Um, and a lot of photographers were just like, why did you do that? And then it kind of wound up becoming like this distinct thing that a lot of people hired me would just be like, it's so nice that you just have one tattoo. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get more. You know? um, but it kind of listening to the feedback and being kind of younger and not so assertive did definitely shape the ideas of like what kind of tattoos I wanted on my body, at least like while I'm still modeling.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me aware that I really wanted to have more like symmetrical kind of like decorative work for the time that I'm modeling, and not have things that are just kind of like splotched on. And that's just because I think it's easier to make those sorts of designs work in a bunch of different styles of photography. So I mean, it's interesting to think about how modeling has influenced my choice about like what I put on my body permanently. But I mean, there's still projects that I want to get done, like sleeves and stuff that I would like to have, that I think will just be like easier to have the process of getting them done, like not interrupt my income and my
Right.
like life, because sleeves, like they're just in progress for so long.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been interesting, like adding work as I continue to model. Sometimes infrequently, but most of the time, like when I'm modeling, when I'm getting my tattoo work done, I'm like, okay, I have 10 days and then I have to have a shoot and it has to be healed by them. And just kind of like trying to not ever have anything that looks unfinished. Um,
Right.
it's been a little bit of a fun juggling game.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about all of the heal time. Yeah, that would definitely. See, I'm afraid of needles, so tattoos are just like not a thing I have to worry about. So I
You get
actually I've
bamboo, though.
what was that?
You get it done with like a little bamboo spike. It's not quite a needle.
Maybe someday. But so I sort of always I admired the models who have tattoos, and especially like your tattoos I've always loved because you make them work with the imagery so much. But I really don't know much about what it takes to run a modeling career with tattoos, which is one of the reasons why, I'm trying to get as much versatility as I can on this summit. And so I was really excited to have you come on to be able to add that input for models who do have tattoos.
Yeah, definitely. I think it takes, honestly, to be successful as like model with tattoos, it takes finding something that is not, or okay, finding something, whether it's your tattoos or something else, that you can like market as your brand. For me, like marketing myself as my tattoos never made sense to me because I just wasn't rushing to like fill myself up with tattoos like kind of haphazardly. Um,
Mm.
and also they're so expensive. Like I don't understand how you can have like your entire body covered at like 20. I don't get it. But anyways, I for me, like what I really banked on for my career as far as like what sets me apart, because that is what your marketing winds up being as a freelance model, is like what makes you as a model somehow unique. Like what skills do you possess, what look do you have, what is it about you that makes you stand out in one way. And for me it was more of like being able to shapeshift, and tattoos seem completely contradictory to that. So with that priority in mind, that really did influence the style of tattoos that I got and like where they are. Um, and that having a really clear idea like at the beginning of like what niche or what like specific need within the modeling industry you want to fill is actually like I think also pretty critical, especially for people who have kind of pigeonholed their in one way or another their physical appearance,
Mm.
whether it's pretty much anything outside of like the ideal that we talked about, like the slight variations within of that, like kind of makes you pigeonholed in this industry, and that's
Right.
extremely frustrating. But it is kind of just the reality of the situation. So figuring out if you want that pigeonhole to be what you're known for, or if you want it to be something else, and working towards that end from the get-go, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for mentioning that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so then the other thing that I wanted to make sure that we're able to talk about um, is I think you said it was about a year ago that you started talking about your gender identity.
Yeah.
Um, and I've really, you know, I don't know how many people have been watching that, but I personally have been watching that. And, between you and several other models, I've been learning a lot um, just about that. But I think um, it's so important to have more models who aren't cis talking about it so that the newer models coming in realize that there's a place for them in the industry.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially as like conversations and um, awareness surrounding the gender spectrum increase, like it's really interesting because the industry is kind of inherently like cis femme oriented in general. There's little niche like men's fashion and things like that, but cis femme identities like dominate the modeling industry like by far. Um, and I actually had the experience of being a professional model kind of like hindering my ability to like identify or acknowledge like what was actually going on within myself for a very long time, because I grew up in a place where like trans non-binary people were ever. The only real experience of anything like that I had was like drag shows, and that seemed to just be theater to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with the performance stuff, I was always like kind of being pushed to present more sexualized, more femme, and I kind of like got the message very early that that was the more profitable presentation. Got me it got me what I wanted. It got me money, and so I just like took that and ran with it for most of my adult life. Um, Modeling was an extension of that. So I am curious. Like I could never know honestly, but I am very curious if I would have actually figured out my own gender identity and a whole bunch of other things if I had not been already indoctrinated in the modeling industry and like just kind of the hyper femme presentation that a lot of these photo shoots require. So that's kind of an interesting point about it. But after coming out, I it's funny because I just wish that I like slowed down to actually allow myself to stop and think, because I have had mostly a either non-existent or like sympathetic kind reaction. And I'm not at the point right now where I'm like pushing. I use they them pronouns because I identify as non-binary,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not at the point where I'm like pointing that out to people at photo shoots and like demanding that they use the correct pronouns, because I still understand that like in the context of a lot of photo shoots, they are interested in shooting a woman and they don't want to like have to wrap their head around that there's an in between, or like where in between, like it's honestly like a lot more stress and work than it's worth most of the time. But just being able to like be out on like social media and out in my life, like with all my friends and briefly with my family, and just having that level of comfort and not always being hyper femme also in front of the camera. Like I've been doing some menswear shoots and things like that, and just feeling comfortable wearing less makeup. It's been a really interesting year and a half, and I've honestly been modeling a little bit less since coming out, just because I've been trying to like allow myself to have the space away from the super femme presentation like that modeling kind of dictates. Just space from doing makeup. Like going like 2 weeks without putting on makeup was kind of crazy. The first time I did it last year, and just being really comfortable in that instantly has been awesome. And I feel like it has actually finally gotten to the point where I am interested in like diving back into modeling in a more concrete way and being a little bit more loud with folks, because I feel like the easiest way for people to be to learn about these issues and to like actually humanize them is to have experiences with people that are positive, but also experiences that are informative, and just like actually knowing someone who is trans or non-binary and experiencing them as a human being rather than just like some abstract idea can change things for people. So it's a little bit like alienating and frustrating in the modeling industry sometimes on that level, but trying to keep that in mind and just be like optimistic and understanding with people is definitely kind of my MO when it comes to navigating all that.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So that makes me wonder. You're saying that it helps for people to have a positive and informative experience. And so I'm wondering, in your experience with photo shoots, does it often turn into just 2 hours of you trying to educate them? Because that sounds really awkward and horrible.
No. See, like if I'm on a photo shoot with someone and they like obviously haven't read my like little like introduction thing on the internet anywhere, and like they're just assuming that I'm a cisgendered woman, a lot of times I'll just be like, okay. Like I don't want, because like I do not have the emotional energy to just like straight up like drop that on people.
Right.
But in the case of people who like try or fumble or like acknowledge but kind of like mess things up, I don't know, like people who like obviously have been notified but don't actually like know what any of the words mean. um those are more likely the situations where I'll like try to talk to people, and it also just totally depends on the person and their communication style and like the vibe of the shoot, how long. Like if I'm gonna be shooting with someone all day, like we probably need to like establish some sort of like basic understanding because it's
Yeah.
8 hours, but if it's a 2 hour shoot, I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, like, and I want to be better about that, but it also just, sorry, there's a
Kitty!
it also is just like, honestly, as much as I want to be part of um a more like positive educating aspect of the trans community, it is really emotionally exhausting to talk about that stuff all of the time and to continually, it feels like you're continually seeking validation. And
Yeah.
and that's just like not my style generally. Like I get weirded out when photographers are like, "Oh, that's nice, good, great, love it, yes." I'm like I know a lot of people like the feedback, and I'm one of those people who's just like, do you not like what I'm doing? Like too much feedback's weird for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, so like the sensation of like constantly seeking validation is uncomfortable, but I do, when it seems like it can actually be like a not negative situation, I do try to like talk to people, but I'm still at the point where I'm picking my battles for sure.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking there's so much emotional labor already involved in what we do. And that just sounds like a whole nother couple tons of emotional labor thrown in on top.
Yeah, yeah. Um it it's also just like with certain people I know that going the distance and like pointing it out and really like trying to be like demanding about pronouns or demanding about, you know, the way that people, because basically I still feel comfortable presenting like anywhere on the gender spectrum. Like my presentation doesn't really bother me that much.
Mm-hmm.
um, it's when people like assume things about me as a person based on gender stuff that I started to feel weird. And luckily that doesn't happen that much at most of these like photo shoots where they want you to be like the idealized femme like archetype, you know, like they're not thinking that much about like what you do on your time off. Most of the time, some people like to assume a lot of things and ask a lot of very strange questions, and that's more of a situation where I'd be like, hey, yeah, so this is you know, like, just so you know, like, I don't identify as a woman, so a lot of the questions you're asking are like super weird. But for the most part, like, I've had a lot of people actually read about it online and then very politely like just ask for some more information and be like, so explain how this works to me. And in those situations, like I personally am happy to like kind of try to talk to people, and just let them know my experience, so maybe they can be a bit more empathetic when trying to relate to someone who they've never met who might be experiencing something similar.
Um, so I'm wondering, um, you know, I tried to do my best to educate myself about gender identity and such. But I'm wondering, since as a whole, I know there's probably, I mean, it's probably going to be primarily cis female models watching this summit. And many of them might not know much. I'm just wondering if there's something, how do I phrase this? I'm not trying to ask you to educate us. I'm just wondering if there's something that we should know about how to make the community more inclusive.
Totally. Well, for me, I so a shorthand present non-binary.
Mhm.
But basically the way that I experience that is gender fluidity. So I have very masculine, assertive, and also like presentation wise, I flip flop basically between a lot of different things. Like some days I feel very femme and I want to dress femme, but like my brain is still stuck in like super masculine mode. So um, to me, it's just always been like very confusing trying to put everything into like one neat little box. And I just kind of like banked on the fem box for a very long time, like I mentioned. So for me personally, like uh I feel like I exist in kind of like a strange subsect of what trans is. I have a lot of friends who are, just trans male to female, and for them, pronouns are like a really huge deal. Names are a really huge deal because they, a lot of them are like working very hard to match their identity to the gender that they feel they are after being like kind of like forced into this opposite pigeonhole their whole lives. So what matters and like what makes people feel included is going to be totally different
Right.
um, for all trans people, and that's kind of like the kicker, like
Mhm.
that's the number one thing that I feel like if people understand, um, being inclusive will be easier. Um, as far as being inclusive in the modeling community, I think the number one thing that people can do is kind of a larger concept of just like don't tolerate body shaming, like of any sort, whether it's of a cisgendered person or of a transgendered person. Like that is where most transphobia like comes out in, in the modeling community, I feel like, and just in viewing pictures in general.
Mhm.
I feel like that is the easiest way for people to be transphobic, and the general practice of body shaming and like idealizing perfect archetypes and stuff like that also perpetuates that, in my opinion. So, um, and being more inclusive, just like don't deal with, you know, just don't deal with basic body shaming stuff. Like people don't need to be compared to each other in order to assess like their aesthetic strengths. And that is one of the most like basic, like kind of backhanded forms of body shaming that I experience all the time in this industry. It's just like, well, you look kind of like this one model, but you're a little bit skinnier, and like you got the tattoos. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I also just look like me, and they look like them, and that's great. Like, we're not, I don't know. And that's kind of the most, because I feel like trans people are very often like expected to, especially visually, like if we want to be models, actors, anything where our actual image is our work and our identity, people just want us to like conform to one of the binaries. And for non-binary people, it's very difficult, I feel, because we don't want to fit into any one box really permanently, most of us. And that whole like body shaming culture really like keeps pushing you one way or the other. Like ass is too big for the man, and like boobs aren't big enough for a woman, like that sort of stuff. And it's just really like in supporting and encouraging people from with all body types, with all gender representations, gender identities, colors of skin, colors of hair, colors of eye, like tattoos, not tattoos, just actually seeing the positives in all those different kinds of bodies, as opposed to picking apart how it somehow uh, takes away from this like perfect cisgendered white sort of like image that we have, of what beautiful is. I think that inclusivity really starts in each individual's mind when it comes to that sort of stuff.
Yeah. That's really valuable. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah. So I feel like I've probably taken more of your time than I intended to. Is it all right if I ask you one last question?
Yeah, we can do one more question. I gotta run into
Awesome.
you after that, but we can do one
Yeah.
more. I'll try to be brief.
I'm just trying to ask everybody. So, if there was one piece of advice that you could choose, that you think would have been most important if you could go back and tell that to yourself earlier in your career, um, or to tell the models watching today, what would that be?
I think the most important thing I could tell them would be to, not let anyone else determine your value. and whether that's like your hourly rate or how you're spoken to. Do not allow anyone else to like do the assessment and the I don't know. I feel like a lot of young models wind up in these situations where um their time is taken advantage of, or they are somehow taken advantage of, and I really think that comes from not establishing it comes from people being messed up, but also like the best way to protect yourself from that is to establish like really clear boundaries about what is acceptable in professional situations, and also to just like establish what your time is worth and what skills you have and what those are worth, and being really kind and like clear but also just like really solid on knowing your worth and like not selling yourself short. I think if I had heard that advice earlier on, like I don't know what could have happened, but I know that like I would not have been scraping by for the time that I was, and I would have avoided a lot of like kind of unsavory situations that I found myself in if I had chosen to value myself as highly as like I do now, which I think no matter where you're at in your modeling career, like ego is kind of a part of being an artist. Like you got to have it. It's weird, but you kind of take a really removed and strategic approach to that by prioritizing having professional boundaries and knowing your own professional value and really like being assertive about that. And I think as especially for women or people who are raised as women in society, that is really difficult because we're taught to kind of defer to other people as far as like especially assessing like our physical worth. So don't buy into that, I guess, is my biggest piece of advice, and really like set clear boundaries for yourself, for the people you work with, and also for like what your time is worth and what you're okay what you are okay with and not okay with as far as like working in this industry, because I think a lot of people are wishy-washy when they start out, and that causes problems.
Yeah, that's awesome that you went straight to my heart there. You said know your value, and I'm like, yes. I'm always preaching that. So
Awesome. It's solid advice. I wish like I give it even to people outside of this industry all the time. Like I do resume consultations and stuff, and I'm always just telling people like you're not writing this like you think you have anything to offer anyone. Like you have to actually like believe that you have value to accrue it, you know?
absolutely, that is great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It was such a treat to get to talk to you. And
Oh,
I really appreciate you being willing to talk about your journey as a trans model with me, because I feel like that's really valuable for newer trans models who aren't sure if there's a space for them in the industry, and for cis models who maybe haven't even realized they're making a really big assumption saying, hey, ladies, when they talk to other models.
yeah, it's gonna be like that for years. I'm
Yeah.
not holding my breath, but I appreciate the people who like make a obvious effort to be more inclusive, and so like thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the space to talk about it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I so appreciate you coming on and being on here. And I know you had such a busy week, so it was a big deal for you to be here.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all good. Yeah, I have to run dinner now, but it's been
Okay. Well,
wonderful.
normally this is where I'd ask where people can find you, but I'll get your links from you later and stick them under the video.
Cool. The easiest and quickest one I can tell you is my website, which is just leahvelocity.com. Super simple.
Perfect. Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Have a great day, everyone.
You too. Bye, Eleanor.